I decided while I read this book today, the book review had to be done tonight. So, hello, blonde bombshellers. I have also a little bit of news for you. I had on a tank top last night that you didn't get to see because I was very self conscious. And I'm my own worst enemy at sometimes. And I thought that I looked okay in it. But then when I got to take it off today and change into my day clothes, I was shocked. It was the size that I used to wear all the time, large 12, 14 tank top. And I took a picture of that moment because it felt so rewarding and so wonderful to actually fit into something that I used to wear all the time. And thank you for sharing that with me today on Instagram and Facebook. Next time I wear it, I promise I will wear it for you all. But this is one of my other smaller tank tops that lately I keep wearing a lot. I have found that I look good in blue. So, I used to think that blue was so depressing and everything, but really it's not that depressing. It's kind of a happy, upbeat color. After all, when you would wear a mood ring, it says blue is happy, right? Well, enough talking about that. Let's get to the important stuff. This book right here that I got at the Dollar General for $3 last week. Yeah, $3. At first, I could not get into this book. I'll admit it. There was too much heated passion, if you will. But as the book wore on, it showed that to be a dad, you didn't have to be a biological dad to step up and know how to be a dad. Plus, the little girl is so smart in her wisdom, in her young wisdom, to know who really cares and who doesn't. And I want to share with you what the book is about. Then I will go through with you and share my little parts of this book. And I will give you the rating of the book, which is something you all look forward to as well. By the way, I want to thank everyone for making my videos a success. Lately, it seems like there's some videos that are being watched that I wouldn't think would be watched in a million years because I'm wearing glasses, and girls with glasses rarely get second glances. We all know that. So, anyway, I'm going to read you the back of the book, and then we're going to hit some of these parts here. Single mom Eden Harwood has a lively daughter, a blooming business, and a juicy secret she's hung on to for 10 years. She doesn't mind a bit that there's no room for romance in her whirlwind life. Until 6-foot infinity, smoldering-eyed, bass-voiced Gabe Caldera reminds her of what she might be missing. The principal of Hellcat Canyon Elementary is usually knee-deep in fawning PTA moms, but Gabe has only eyes for one fiery, funny, skittish redhead who barely knows he's alive. But this ex-Navy SEAL never fails to get what he wants, and what he wants is to fan those sparks between him and Eden into the kind of bonfire you can only see 2 counties away. The passion is so explosive, and the tenderness has them thinking about forever. But when Eden's past waltzes into town for a reckoning, her secret is blown them apart. Still, Gabe never will back down from a fight, especially if the ultimate prize is Eden's heart. Okay, well, now this is the first thing that you come upon when you open up this book, which I like the artwork. It's definitely kind of fallish, if you will. I'll read this to you, then I'll read to you the parts that I've marked. I know you all look forward to this. She was a devil woman. I'll kiss anything you want me to. He made it sound like a blood vow. She gasped when he slid his hand up through her hair and held her fast. This time he went in for a take-no-prisoners kiss, designed to melt bones, stop time, erase the memories of all kisses that had come before. What the blank day did they have to lose kind of kiss? Molten, savage, skillful. They were on the clock. He was a guy who knew how to make a point, and he never half but anything. Clearly, neither did she. Silk, heat, tongue, lips. The taste of her roared through his bloodstream, tightened all his muscles. He curled into one hand into the edge of his desk, a reflex against floating up the ceiling because suddenly whatever boundaries he'd once had melted away. And damn, she gave as good as she got. It was hot, deep, dangerous tangle of tongues, the slide of lips, when she moaned softly, low in the back of her throat, guttural, helpless pleasure. He slipped his hand from her hair and sank backwards into the chair 1 second before the bell rang. Okay, well, we're going to move into page where the butterfly is. That's the first clip. It took me 63 pages in before I could share something with you. Usually if I can't share with you by page 50, I don't even bother. But this book turned around for me from being a hot, passionate book to about books that hit on sensitive matters. So he's asking her here, or is she asking him? They have this thing of trying to get her little girl to eat broccoli, and he helps out, and they get the little girl to eat broccoli, and he's like, if you're still hungry, I think there's some broccoli left. I'm good. What I'm trying to say is, after a while, you don't want any of it because it all looks the same, and there's just too much of it. And that's the kind of how, Tinder, all sites like that, they feel like that to me. So do you think, quote, hard to get, end quote, inherently adds something to value? His eyebrow shot up. He heard the faint challenge in that question. I know the difference between hard to get and, quote, worth the effort to get, end quote. I'm hardly a kid anymore. I'm pushing 40. I guess I see things through an experience filter, too. Life is short, and time is scarce, and all the guessing around surrounding dating feels like, I don't know, been there, done that. I don't need to graze at the buffet. I'm all right with waiting until I see something that feels right. And when I see what I want, it's hard not to just cut to the chase, like you said. Damn, but had just accomplished a lot with a few sentences. He was telling her that he wasn't a pushover, that he'd probably known some loss, and if she was not mistaken, that he'd seen something that he wanted. And she was standing right in front of him. Moving on. One of my friends just texted me a message, so I had to see what it was about. Okay. Page 106. Yeah, another cutie little thing here. Do. Okay, so he's asking, why do you think you're more like your dad? She hesitated. Well, my dad's a little less effusive, a little more guarded than my mom, ferociously loving and protective in his own growly way, thanks that my mom hung the moon and even the 40-some-odd years of marriage. Yeah, he said softly, so why do you think you're guarded? It was a friendly conversational question, but it was also a dare in a way. And if she took it, it was another step down the ladder into deep into the pool. Then again, every question between them was like this, and she excelled at swimming, and she couldn't resist a dare. But the deeper they got in, the harder it would be to just zip back out to the safety of certainty. It had been a pretty long time since she answered these kind of questions about herself. Who was she? Apart from Annalise's mom, when was the last time someone wanted to know? Maybe I was born that way, but sometimes I think that it's every family is dealt its sort of quotient of emotions to be distributed among the members. You know, like cell phone plans dole out minutes. My sister Avalon was always so heartfelt on her sleeve, playing St. Francis to all the animals, and I kept mine under wraps because I thought everyone would be surprised by how powerfully I felt things. I think pride was sort of wrapped up in it too, and I kind of like being hard to read. I have never said that to anyone in my life, certainly not in a drive-by situation. Her cheeks were warm, and it says something of a warning to tread delicately. Saying these things out loud made her feel a little raw. It must be my persuasion of authority of the uniform. He gestured to the neon vest, but thank you for being honest. Notch, she said. That made him grin. It's what I have only one cat, by the way, she added. How's that again? Because I feel like I can only love him really well and really personally rather than being profligate with my affections. That was a warning and a reassurance and an explanation. We move on. Page 125. Interesting. He could suss her out pretty well, but it was clear that he wasn't used to being accurately read. He was a guy who was just used to being in control. I kind of thought that was passionate, but that's just me. We're going to move on. Next paperclip down. 139. Okay. So let's see. I believe this is where her little girl has gotten in trouble again, and he's been a little bit more honest with her, telling her about how his ex-fiance died, and she's been very compassionate and understanding. And together they stood absolutely wordlessly in the hall as the kids swirled around them, 2 minutes until the bell. He struggled to recover his aplomb, then gave up. What was it to him? Truthfully, she said, a little more conventionally, you really made me think hard about it, because I don't think a man has broken my heart before. He asked her who was the last man who broke her heart. But I realized it breaks a little at each all the time, in a sweet way. You know how sometimes there are swarms of little quakes along the minor faults in California? When Annalise says something amazing. A little while ago, and this is going to sound dumb, but I caught her talking to a caterpillar outside near our roses, explaining that it was about to become a butterfly, which might feel funny, but she was reassuring it, telling it not to be afraid. It's something I told her about. My heart is broken and rearranged all the time. Feels like, but it's stronger along the broken parts, and the whole landscape of my life changes all the time. The funny pain in his chest was a little like that jerk after you yanked the parachute ripcord and it unfurled to catch the wind. Not dumb at all, he said when he finally could speak. He didn't really want to speak, actually. He just wanted to stand there and look at her and listen to her as if she was music and touch her poor, beautiful, tired face, which, if he was not mistaken, was sporting a tiny booger in the left nostril, and it was pretty clear she'd had Annalise's cold, too. He really wanted to make her life easier and better, to buy them name-brand Barbies if that's what they wanted, to take care of them when they were sick. Their bodies were suspended in that push-pull tension, leaning ever so slightly toward each other while being tugged at by their days and their duties. And that's when he gets called to class. We're going to move on. Next page. Okay, next paper clip, I should say. Page 166. They've had words, and he's not very gentle, not very kind, but here's how he says to her, 10 years is kind of a long time, he said sympathetically, but I guess I didn't take you for a chicken. Because they're talking about becoming passionate, and she kind of backs away from it, and he calls her a chicken. Anyway. Page 238. You don't get it. It isn't what you think, and my word on the matter should be enough for you. It really should be, shouldn't it? We're there, yet relationship-wise, were there even in a quote-unquote relationship? Maybe they have been from the very beginning, because that wasn't the premise of their whole relationship. Radical honesty, cutting to the chase, but he heard it, the faintest bit of doubt in her voice, and he suspected the blind acceptance that she'd been asking of him, and wasn't entirely reasonable, but she was throwing it a Hail Mary, hoping he'd be a noble and just let her slide. He honestly didn't know what to say. All he knew was he wasn't feeling noble or selfless or magnanimous. Finally, he just turned around and examined the dusty jukebox. He fished through his pocket and dumped quarters in the slot and punched a song. Then he fished out another quarter and punched in another song. In the reflection of the glass, he saw Eden was standing motionless behind him. He couldn't see her expression. He put another quarter in the jukebox and punched in a song and emptied the pocket of quarters and punched buttons 5 times. He could see her standing behind him for the first of the 3. And when he heard her chair scrape back again, he went back to his buddies, whose heads all swiveled in tandem toward the wall-mounted muted television, to pretend they weren't watching him with the same avidity they watched any sporting event. He went back to them without another word. And that's because she's out to eat with a gentleman who is a rock star, who happens to be the father to her little girl, but he doesn't know this yet. And so things get a little heated throughout the book, and yes, there's some jealousy, which is kind of passionate, but other than that, it's a very good book. A lesson of compromise for Annalise at that moment, and in the love and power dynamics, always default to kindness when something is smaller than you are and dependent upon you. Sometimes what you want means less than what someone you love wants. Did she want to pet both sides of Gabe? Her heart was slamming so hard she was a little nauseous, and her mouth was arid from nerves. His face implacable, stunned, and behind that something much worse. A hard resignation that he's already indicted her, and she hadn't done anything wrong, or had she? She sat in the reeling silence of the moment. The way she felt now told her that it wasn't about who did or didn't have rights. She just never wanted to betray Gabe. "What the hell's wrong with you?" she said finally to Jasper, and so suddenly it gave him a start. He shrugged. "That dude rubbed me the wrong way." "So?" "I have a feeling he's been rubbing you the right way, am I right? Which is a good thing. I mean, someone should rub you the right way," he said charitably. She stared at him in a livid amazement. She lunged forward until her face was so close to his that she could count the stubble and get a bit of a grip on his t-shirt collar. "You listen to me, Jasper Towns. I know you think you're being cute and clever and flippant is your shtick. And now you think you can get away with that crap, but we are not a thing, you and I. We happen exactly once, and I don't like this macho posturing, and I don't like you to joke about anyone rubbing me. And I really truly don't care if you don't like me for being a hard ass about it, but if you want to think you're worthy of spending one particular of my time in the company of my daughter, if you want me to think that you're a grown-up, go apologize right now to Mr. Caldera. Tell him that you were out of line and give him an appropriate excuse that in no way mentions me, and make it believable. I'll wait right here." She released him and sat back in her chair hard. He stared at her open-mouthed, unadulterated amazement for at least half a verse of John Mayer. "You're blanking with me, right?" he concluded. She rolled her eyes, nearly spraying them. "Believe me, I am in no way." She dropped her voice to a mocking, raspy baritone. "Blanking with you." She air quoted that. I like how she sets the record straight right then, right there, so he can't jump from one conclusion and to another, that he gets the right idea that she doesn't want a relationship with the little girl's dad. She wants a relationship with Gabe, but yet Gabe is just being so close-minded, and all he sees is that, and all he hears and cares about is that she canceled this date to go eat with this man at a restaurant, and he thinks that she would rather be with him than who's a rock star than just an average everyday principal of the school. Page 244. And then some years down the road, she could say to Annalise with conviction. This is what I like, how she says how she wants to tell her daughter about her own dad. "I knew your dad was stable as a leaf floating on the breeze, and I didn't want him to break your heart when your heart was so innocent. I couldn't have borne that. I was responsible for your happiness and for making you feel safe in this world, for giving you that foundation of courage and faith in life that comes from being loved, so that you could feel clear and brave enough to discover whether my truths are also yours. And that's why he wasn't in our lives when you were a child." I think that's awesome. I just do. Okay, we're moving on. Page 258. The thing is, he said slowly, I think you didn't tell me about towns because it was easier just not to, and if I hadn't seen you in Pasquale's, that's the restaurant, you may or may not have told me, as he was sitting up in there in your apartment talking to Annalise, because it was easier not to. And that makes me feel like crap, Eden. It makes me feel like maybe you are not the person I thought you were, and makes me question everything between us. She went motionless. And then the hot color rushed to the skin, and her eyes narrowed to glinty sapphires. How could you? How dare you? Why can't you? She stood up so abruptly the chair wobbled to and fro like a drunk. It didn't topple. I can't deal with this right now, Gabe. With you. He said nothing, but some perverse part of him was savoring both her anger and his own. It was anesthesia. I can't even say that word. Anesthesizing, even as a tiny voice of reason was making what sounded like a faint air-raid siren sound in his mind. And I guess that's why I basically came here to say, she added, as if it was a deciding that then and there that they stared each other down. He didn't know what his expression revealed to her. If it was anything like hers, it didn't look like a person who had won an important point or gained the upper hand or come to a comfortable decision. It looked like the face of a person being prepped for the guillotine. Well, I guess it is impossible for busy adults to date. His tone was richly laced with irony. He stood up, too, reflexes, manners, slowly, just to make the point that he was still a certain amount of control, and just because whatever else he was a gentleman, even if he was a dick. Apparently the two weren't mutually exclusive. So I guess this is it, then, she said. She tried in sentences. Her voice was shaking. Guess so, he managed neutrally enough, though as his voice had gone arid as the Sahara. Oh, another fight. These two have a love-hate relationship, but that love-hate is a magnet for them. Page 290. This is what I think speaks volumes about the little girl. She's explaining to, after she's met her dad, she's explaining to her own mother the difference of what he is like versus what Gabe is like to her. Sure, I think being a father and being a dad are a little bit different. Being a father is the result of biology. You know what that means, right? It takes a lady and a man to make a baby. Annalise scrunched her nose here and waved her arms as if her mom just let it pass gas by the way of discouraging her from expanding on that. And being a dad is something you kind of become as a result of being there every day, being involved in everything you do, and taking care of you the way a mom does. Like carrying you on your shoulders at picnics and fixing stuff and coaching your soccer team and stuff like that. Yeah, stuff like that. And making sure you're safe and happy, that you eat your vegetables, clean your room, and learn how to build stuff, and teaching you how to drive when it comes time. She stopped when the guilt swooped in. She had a great dad who was part of her nearly everything, and she was and said and did the same as her mom was. She'd known the luxury of waking up with Glenn's comforting, gruff, hilarious presence in the house every day, and here she was expounding on the idea of a great father to a kid who had Jasper Towns, more an exotic pet than a dad. Okay. So we're going to read on here for a little bit. She was desperate to ask Annalise, do you feel safe here with me? Do you feel loved enough? Are you conscious of missing something in your life like Jasper said he was? Was it a house with a drafty window or a gap where your baby tooth fell out and now everything was whole again? Now that mystery was solved. Questions she couldn't, of course, ask the 10-year-old. Move on. She was going to have to keep doing her best she could and take it in a heaping dose of faith, the way she'd taken everything so far. So, like, Grandpa is a dad? Right, your grandpa's a great, great dad for me and a great granddad to you. And she kind of brings up the principal and gets her to thinking about the principal that she's mad at, which is kind of cute. Page, I think it's 302. No, I guess it's 301. Back up, Donna. Do do do. Okay, so they had another fight, and he's at the bar with his best friend, and his bar friend, Mac, is laying it on the line for him, making him really pay attention to his feelings for Eden. I agree she could have done better than that. Which part of you is hurting most? Stop me when you feel a twinge. Your pride, your ego, or your heart. I get a ping on all of them. This wasn't Mac's comfort zone, providing comfort that was. Then again, Avalon was doing wonders with his emotional vocabulary. You know, Gabe, this isn't a foxhole. I mean, she didn't train you for how to be an intricate rock star into her life and yours. Maybe you can cut her some slack. Maybe she was afraid of losing you and she chickened out when she had those chances to tell you about him. Not everyone is Joe Courage like you are. Joe Courage? Gabe snorted incredulously. But a second later, something Max said just settled on him and sank in a sort of uncomfortable truth. Afraid of losing you. He went quiet. Maybe she knows you better than you think. Anticipated all of, Mac gestured to miserable Gabe and the beer. All of this, you acting like all broody and self-righteous. Of all his friends, only Mac could get away with assessing him as that. And frankly, he didn't think anyone knew him as well as Eden did. Some of it she learned, and sometimes it seemed like she'd been knowing him, which was not a luxury. It was a freaking miracle. The problem is, Gabe said slowly, and this is what kills me, is she might have been right to end our whatever it was before we got in both too deep. Because God knows where this towns thing is going. I mean, maybe she needs to get Annalise and her whole family accustomed to towns being part of her life. And that part doesn't really include me at all. And then maybe it shouldn't. And maybe he drained his beer. I don't want to sit by and watch that happen like Brother Teresa. And what would have been pretty funny if it wasn't so tragic. Mac laughed anyway. Gabe shot him a baleful look. Huh, do you think any of that is true? He took a sip of his beer. He mulled it over. Nope, Gabe said finally with a ghost smile. Mac gave a short laugh, more sympathy than humor. So tell me, Gabe, do you think she's your destiny? He gave the word destiny the sort of melodramatic flourish that would warm Annalise's heart. Gabe was saved from answering that question when Glenn leaped to the stage and seized the microphone and announced, "Everyone give it up for Mikey McShane." Mikey's song was tended, heartfelt, and literal, and Gabe and Mac often enjoyed them, not always for the reasons Mikey intended. Thank you, Mikey, whose hair was dyed black and nose-piercing look, though, as it might have been his little infected, said to the smattering of applause, "This song is called Polar Bears Are Dying." Mikey settled on the stool on stage, stuck his tongue out between his teeth, and painstakingly went about tuning his guitar down a half step and befritted a dirge. What do you think about the song? What do you think this song is about, Mac? Gabe wondered dryly. I'm going to guess it's about dying polar bears, Gabe. What would he do if he was afraid of losing? What would a polar bear do if it was cornered and afraid? Fight back. Lash out. So what are you going to do? Mac broke into at what was tuning into an epiphany. He didn't have to say, quote, about Eden, end quote. The subject of all sentences in Gabe's life right now was Eden. It was a fair question, and Mac had known him long enough to expect Gabe to know, to have a plan. When didn't he? He was floating on a glacier all alone, Mikey sang, which felt a little uncomfortable on the nose at the moment. Finish this beer, he told Mac finally, and survive that song. Okay. Let's see why we marked this page coming up. Page 318. Okay, so the two girls that are going to school together is Annalise and Caitlin, and they get into this fight. And they're back in the principal's office. The two girls and the two mothers. And right now, Gabe's getting ready to speak. At last he breathed in what sounded like a steadying breath, then exhaled. I know that sometimes when we're scared about losing something, or not being good enough. Sometimes we lash out, but then we end up feeling bad about it, and it's worse than before. If you feel that way, it's best to be honest about it rather than just hurt someone you like. Eden stared at him, wondering. Hope flared like a sunlight in her chest. Its sudden presence made her realize how dark and cramped her life had felt without him. But Gabe had deliberately not looked at her. "Okay, Mr. Caldera," Caitlin said. "One more thing, Eden. I'd like to know exactly just what Caitlin said about your dad." "Well, she said that my dad could be anyone, like she said before." And then, of course, they find out that, the dad is the famous rock singer, and that the little girl's not lying, but that was kind of what the fight was about. Okay, we're going to take on page 323. They're about to exit the office, and we share a moment between our Eden and Gabe. "Eden," Gabe said gruffly. She turned. "Don't," he said simply. "Don't?" "Feel guilty about Towns being Annalise's father and how it happened. Or Annalise getting into a fight, because I know you're feeling guilty right now. None of us really get much of a say in our parents." She was dumbstruck. "How'd you—" She stopped. "They got each other." That was how he'd known how to say that. She hovered there, her entire being twisted like a rag of knowledge of what they could have had. They got each other. But a fundamentality in things, in their characters, pride and stubbornness and a need to win, had blown it apart. Why didn't she know how to fix that? Mrs. Marker appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Caldera, your next appointment is here," she said, and melted away. "And thanks for coming in, Miss Hardwood." He dropped his eyes. Will these two ever get it together? Okay. Page 327. She kept replaying in her mind. He'd given advice to Caitlin Pennington about being afraid could lead to lashing out. Had it really been a coded message to her? Her heart lurched at the idea of Gabe being afraid. Once or twice she seized her phone, intending to text him. But then the nerve had failed. What would she say? What could he say? Would he say? Gabe was his father's son. He saw things in black and white, too. She texted Jasper once, though. Just once. Because, so help her, this was a test. She reminded him of the date of the raffle, so he could be there, and would be there in person, and she would not be the person who nagged him like a mother. As the morning of the raffle neared, she hadn't heard back from Jasper. Jasper had made a promise to be there for the little girl. And like most little girls, they take their father's word for the way it should be. Thank God Eden knew to look at the bigger picture. And right here, when there's a raffle, and the dad said he was going to donate something, and it doesn't come, that's when Gabe steps in and donates something amazing. She frowned down at the reading of the glasses pushed higher on her face, and it lit up like a lamp as she read, "From Annalise Harwood, a baseball signed by none other than Joe DiMaggio." Joltin' Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee Clipper himself. She gave a little hop as she announced this. "Woo-hoo, that's a humdinger of a prize." A collective gasp seemed to rustle the streamers. Eden's hand went up to her mouth. "Oh my God," she murmured. Her eyes were burning. Gabe might have just handed over his heart to be raffled. "He can't just hand over his heart, Eden. For God's sake, Dr. Judd Harwood," that's her brother who's a cardiologist. That's what he would have said, in parentheses. The auditorium echoed with a delighted whoos and thunderous applause. Maybe that prize wasn't what everyone expected, but who the hell cared? It was a Joe DiMaggio baseball. That thing is worth at least $1,000, a guy near Eden marveled over the sound of the crowd, "and I want it. You can buy 5 tickets, his wife said sternly but lovingly. "Only 5. "Aw," he said sadly. Grins and thumbs up were aimed at Eden and Annalise. Eden looked up and caught Jan Pennington's eyes on her. The expression was kind of harsh to read. She didn't appear to be gloating, however. Eden was pretty sure that she'd been spot on a gloat across the auditorium. She tried to smile. But she found herself turning to curl her arm around Annalise again. She tucked her head against hers and briefly buried her face in Lizzie's hair, buying a moment alone with joy. It was too overwhelming and too personal. She was not prepared for the whole auditorium to see the contents of her heart writ large on her face. Gabe had done it because he was indeed his father's son. And what else he had said about his dad? When he loved something, it was for keeps, hell or high water. An argument could be made that Jasper Towns certainly was both. And Gabe had saved Jasper's butt for her sake and Annalise's. Eden saw Gabe nowhere in that crowd. She hadn't seen him all night. Annalise's smile was uncertain, but the applause damned it if no matter what. She saw her father's child, too, making her smile. She waved graciously, which almost made Eden laugh. I don't get it, Mama. Did my dad Jasper send a baseball instead of a guitar, and people liked it? The truth was deceptively simple, but it had infinite strata. Now was not the time to attempt to explain the strata. Yet she couldn't bring herself to lie to Annalise about something sacred. All she said was, yes, people love it, honey. And the baseball is good, right? Annalise heard the roars of approval. Still, it wouldn't be official till her mom, the person she trusted most, more than any other person in this world, confirmed it. It's wonderful, honey. It's the best thing here, truly. People are going to want it. You'll make a lot of money for the school, and everyone will be so happy and proud and grateful to you because of it's you. The baseball is kind of the thing that people will cherish. She swallowed, drawed in a breath, cherish their whole lives. Yay! Annalise brightened. Her world restored to brightness, but her light dimmed a little when she turned to Eden to put a hand on her knee. But Mama, why are you crying? You silly, I'm not crying. I just got something in my eye. We're going to go to page 342. And what I adore about this ex-Navy SEAL, who's a now principal, he goes to Jasper Towns, the father of Annalise Hardwood, and he has a heart-to-heart with him. And he kind of brings him a come-to-Jesus moment in his own way. He's telling him, Jasper keeps telling him how brave he is for being an ex-Navy SEAL, and Jasper exasperated laughed and shook his head. Oh, come on, Jasper said irritably. Cut the noble crap. That's how everyone defines brave, willingly to get shot down or blown up, defending people, rushing into burning buildings. There has to be danger for someone to be brave, right? Doing all these right things even when it's hard, even when you don't want to, or when you're afraid you're going to mess it up and so forth. That's what brave is, and I don't like knowing it, but I know definitely I'm not that guy. I'm not brave. Tonight was a culmination of me recognizing the magnitude of something I gotten myself into with Annalise and chickening out. She's going to want things from me like consistency and follow through, and I'm going to have to think about what I do and say because it'll get back to her. I never had to do that before, and I want her to like me, even love me. Her family hates me, and He sank back in the sofa, pressed his lips together. Gabe was familiar with the tactic of easily accepting blame. It could disarm an argument pretty fast. Towns was not going to get off that easy. First, Gabe said, I meant what I said. It's a job. I was fit for it, and I did it, just like you do your job to get up there and make those people go woo, and then you go home, and your tattooed quotes from your song on their bodies, and then regret it a decade when they try to get their grown-up jobs. Mine was occasionally to come close to getting killed, also to make sure no other members of my team was killed. An oversimplification, but when you have a job to do, and you have an affinity to do it, you do it well. I was good at it, just like I'm good at being a school principal now. I can manage and read circumstances and people. And you do what you do extraordinary well. Other things that have no precedence in your life, things that are entirely new, takes practice. Okay, I get what you're saying. Here's the problem with that. You know how when you're a kid, you're mouthing off to your mom, and then you make a face. Your mom would tell you your face would freeze like that? Sure. Getting through my childhood was totally rootless. He tries to fall back on he had a crappy childhood. And I like the way that Gabe is like, ticket. Gabe thoroughly leaned back. Okay, Towns, like I said, I know your life story. But here's the thing. When you're a kid, you're a kid. It's involved on how you get got the way you are doesn't really factor. That's between you and your shrink. Right now you're not a rock god or some poor fatherless kid. Right now you're just the idiot who broke a little girl's heart when he could have been so easily a hero. Jasper froze. His hand tightened on the can of beer. And to my knowledge, it's never been broken before, so you know there's a dubious milestone for you. She trusts adults. She's innocent that way. Annalise is the most precious thing in the world to Eden, and she took the risk of allowing you into her life because that's what you wanted. Do you have any idea how tough that decision was for her? For her to share that amazing little girl with you? Do you really get it? When you broke Annalise's heart, you broke her mother's heart, and I'll be damned if I let you hurt her mother if I can do anything about it. And I just love the way Gabe is a stand-up guy. He's never been a dad before, but by God, he's going to be a dad that the other man can't be. And so we're going to go to page 345. So, Gabe continued slowly, as though speaking to a child who was one transgression away from juvie. I'm here because I'm going to offer you a chance to make it right with Annalise and look like a big man who just made an innocent rookie mistake. And that's all Eden and her daughter are going to know. Because I think the fact that you actually care enough to run away means you actually care enough to get your own crap together around this. After that, you're on your own. And so Gabe told Jasper his plan and how Jasper could make it right. And we're almost near the end, kids, I promise. Page 351. Let's all give Mr. Towns a huge hand for thank you. He just made a remarkable, generous donation to our musical department. We're going to have brand new instruments, and he's going to stop by once a year to give us all a little music lesson. Just like that, Gabe had given Jasper a little lesson. And that was because Gabe drove a really hard bargain, and Jasper Towns, who hated to fly, flew to his next gig. Page 357. Have I ever fallen in? He prompted, sounding just like a little tense. Love, she completed. When she could get a word out, he cupped his hand to his ear and said sorry. Love, she all but bellowed, causing heads to swivel. Ah, he said, that's what I thought. Oh yeah, 1,000 times. Suddenly, like a cane going at a gong show, and an arm looped around through his and was dragged backward by Meredith Blevins. Gabe Caldera, these two fellas want to be involved in next year's fundraiser. Come on over real quick. Meet Darius and Ray Canyon Collectibles. He flashed a mischievous look over his shoulder as he went. She stood and unabashedly watched him, on fire with curiosity, and over how he was going to explain 1,000 times. She had to hand it to him. He was the least boring principal of a school ever. She remained tucked next to the snack table, semi-camouflaged in her black dress because she didn't want to talk to anyone else, the way she didn't want to hear, say, death metal on heels of the knight in white satin, not yet. When Gabe returned approximately 2 minutes later, he conversationally, okay, the first time I fell in love with you, now get ready girls, because this part makes your heart melt. The first time I fell in love with you was when you stopped to watch a squirrel and a blue jay fight over a french fry. Again, you told me about how your heart broke over and over again for Annalise, and how it broken for me and my fiancé. And when you told me that you had only one cat, and when you told Jan that some people think that a man's heart is just as important as his nether region. And again when I kissed you for the first time, and again when you whispered my name against my hand because you couldn't scream the first time they were together. And then when you asked me why I was being a crap hole, and then when my baseball in a pink box was delivered to me this morning, 1,000 little earthquakes, all reshaping my heart all over. How can that be happening? I asked myself. But I fall in love with you over and over, a little deeper, a little harder, each and every time. His voice had gotten a little quieter, a little hoarser, and his voice, which had begun with bravado, was now tender and uncertain. Holy, talk about weaponizing strengths. Who on earth could withstand that kind of cut to the chasteness without dissolving completely? She never cried in front of anybody, if she could possibly help it, and now all her fellow Hellcat Canyon merchants were impressionistic smears. He used his fingertips to collect them from her lashes. I'm sorry I hurt you. I was scared to death of losing you, and I didn't want to admit it to myself or to you. I figured that out. I know that I wasn't entirely fair to you either. I'm sorry, she sniffed. A few of the people in the room were coping to the fact that something momentous was happening between the principal and the florist. Either that or he was helping her reinstall a contact lens. How about you? Ever been in love? Only once. With you. Short words were only ones she could handle at this moment. Keeping it brief, Miss Harwood? Force of habit. We could make it our new forever habit. Damn, you don't mess around, do you, Your Excellency? Nope. Scared yet? Nope. Never with you. I'm a little, he confessed. Don't worry, Gabe, I'll be brave for you. And I'm going to let you read the epilogue and the rest. But this book gets a 7 on my Richter scale. So that's pretty good. Check this book out. And yes, the passion and the heat deserves about a 10. But I like the parts where he shows a tender side, a caring side, that he knows she has a daughter, and that the father to the daughter hasn't had the ability to know that her dad because he's a rock star. However, the mom did it for all the right reasons, because she thought that if that father was going to be involved in her life, he let her down. And when he finally knows that that is his daughter, because she's written an amazing song called Invisible Dad, and he tries to come into her life, what does he do? He takes that opportunity and lets her down. But Gabe grabs him by the collar and forces him to be the dad that he should be. And that is a man that was a dad that didn't have to be. So the book is a 7, but emotional level probably about a 10, and definitely the passion level is a 10. So check this book out for sure. And I will see you again soon.